So I want to talk about the challenges that chaplaincy ministry faces in learning institutions today, because people do not understand us. People cannot really explain. People are not yet fully aware of what this chaplaincy is. There's a lot of confusion. Chaplains struggle. They suffer. They have families. Remember, they have families too. They have their lives to take care of. They have their careers to build. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Deborah Joy Juma. If you are new here, this is where we talk about chaplaincy in learning institutions. I love talking about chaplaincy in learning institutions because I am a chaplain in one of the top Christian universities that is private in Kenya called Kabarak University. And that has given me an avenue of just practicing chaplaincy and modeling what chaplaincy looks like in this generation. Now, I have talked to you in my previous videos about who a chaplain is and the role they play. I also shared with you the reason why I joined chaplaincy, and if you have not subscribed, if you have not watched that, then you better go back and check episode 1, 2, and 3, and you will be up to you will be updated to where we are right now. So I want to talk about the challenges that chaplaincy ministry faces in learning institutions today. And the first thing that I have found out as a big challenge is the issue of the rising cases of mental health needs. So you find that students come to a learning institutions, workers come to a learning institutions, and they are struggling with their mental issues. They are struggling with depression. They're struggling with trauma issues. They're struggling with anxiety and everything in between. And so as a chaplain, sometimes it becomes very complicated for you to meet the needs of these people. So one of the challenges is that there are many chaplains, yes, but I am not so sure if we are fully equipped. I'm not saying chaplaincy is failing. I'm just saying that we are not very sure that we are doing the holistic thing the right way, the holistic healing the right way. Because if the chaplain, for example, himself, remember chaplains are doing life too, if them themselves are also struggling with mental health and they're dealing with people who are struggling with mental health, then it becomes a big challenge for a chaplaincy ministry to happen. It becomes a big challenge for a chaplain to hold space for a student who is bereaved and debrief them when they themselves are struggling with anxiety. So it is both way. On the chaplain side and also on the clients who come to see the chaplaincy. That is one of the major things that is coming out lately. And then we also talk about religious diversity. You know, as a chaplain, like I said in my first video, a chaplain accommodates everyone. Whether you are of their faith or you are not, they make you feel like you belong. And so it is just difficult for a chaplain sometimes if you're a Christian and you're dealing with people who talk negatively about faith. You know, there's a way it affects you as a chaplain. So that is also one of the challenges that we face as chaplains, because we want to include everyone, yet the religions are very diverse and they are so different. So sometimes you find yourself in a space where you are a bit biased. You want to think about your faith more than the other person's faith, and it is a challenge. Another thing that I have also seen is there's a lot of secularization nowadays. I introduced to you chaplaincy and I told you chaplaincy is ministry in a pluralistic environment or a secularized environment. That is why the other time I told you, if you are a chaplain, you'll find yourself serving in schools, in hospitals, in the military and public security, in special units like sports and people able differently and all those spaces. So now the secularization that has come in makes the chaplain have a hard time in dealing with the people, because some of them speak negatively about faith. They find faith oppressive. Sometimes they also find faith irrelevant, especially the generation that we are raising today. 80% of them look at the things that we do and we remind them about the revival and everything that happened, so that the faith, like for Christian faith, so that the Christian faith gets to where it is right now. And some of the things they dismiss as irrelevant, or sometimes they just speak negatively about chaplaincy. You know, they are used to a certain way of being instructed. For example, those who have grown up in church. So when you tell them that chaplaincy accommodates them, the first thing is them thinking you're going to judge them, or the first thing is them, and then they also think about whether you will understand them better or not. So secularization is a big deal in learning institutions. And remember, students come from different faiths, different denominations. It is hard sometimes to merge them together. And of course, we'll be looking at the opportunities that a chaplain has to bridge that gap, but it is a challenge. Then we also have a challenge of identity crisis. And the identity crisis here comes in when people are explaining chaplaincy. People are not yet fully aware of what this chaplaincy is. There's a lot of confusion. You hear someone referring to a chaplain as a pastor when the two are different. Sometimes they have that notion of somebody who is counseling, somebody who is just offering special prayers. So the identity crisis in terms of who a chaplain is and what a chaplain does is also one of the challenges that we face, because people do not understand us. People cannot really explain. And I will randomly take you through some of my students so that you get to know, do they really understand chaplaincy? You realize that some of them have no idea what chaplaincy really is. Today also, chaplaincy faces the issue of ethical dilemmas and confidentiality issues. For example, a student comes to you, they have a crisis of faith, and as you are digging deep and looking into their history, you come to a point where you realize this student actually is dealing with something deeper than just faith. For example, they are dealing with a deep addiction, yet they don't want you to disclose to anyone or to their parent, they just want you to keep that information confidential, which sometimes is very hard, because if this student goes ahead and starts having issues with self-harm, or they commit suicide or anything in between, then the chaplain is put in a very compromising situation. And that is a challenge, because sometimes you want to contain the information of your client, you want to deal with them in the right way, you want to make them feel safe and just make them understand that you have their story and you will not share it. But when it comes to the place where you feel this person is going to harm themselves or they're going to harm someone else, then it becomes a very big problem. Now, there's something that has also come out today, and this is a cultural shift. There are so many things that are happening in our society that sometimes as a chaplain, you get to a point where you wonder, where am I going to stand without looking judgmental? For example, this issue of LGBTQIA+. As a chaplain, you know this is wrong and it should not be done. Yet these people also want to come to your space and they want to be included and they want you to okay sometimes what they are doing. Because anytime you point out and you call out something that is wrong, sometimes you get into their bad books, you know. But that doesn't mean that chaplains compromise. It just means that the cultural shift limits sometimes the way we do our work. Or even the students will just not show up. They'll just not turn up when you call them for a meeting to discuss some issues, because they feel according to what they believe right now. You know, nowadays the generation that we are raising right now, the millennials, the Gen Zs, and the Gen Alpha, they keep telling you that truth is relative. So there's no absolute truth. And that is why they come up with things as like my truth, her truth, his truth, your truth. And so that becomes very hard. That shift in culture has made it very hard for chaplains to really crack and get into the lives of the students and the life of the clients or the people that they are working with. Then there is also something else that really disturbs chaplains, and that is just burnout. There are very few chaplains. Like where I work, we three people working in the chaplaincy department, yet we have around 10,000 students. So then it forces the chaplain to go out of their way. And I know of institutions that have only one chaplain for the whole university. Or the whole learning, if it is a primary school or a high school or a kindergarten or wherever, you find there is only one chaplain. And so chaplains suffer from burnout. They suffer from just not emptying themselves so much that sometimes they have nothing to pour out to the other people. Remember, if you're working in a learning institution, for example, and it's a boarding institution, then the students will be there throughout from Monday to Monday. So there is no day that you have to just pause and relax unless you are on leave. And sometimes even when you're on leave, somebody is calling you because of the crisis that is happening here and there, and they need your attention. So burnout is a big deal among chaplains. I have encountered chaplains who are actually tired of chaplaincy, not because they are bad chaplains, not because they experienced anything bad in chaplaincy, but just because they are tired. They have been doing a lot of work. And then the other day I was in a conference somewhere where many chaplains from Kenya had been gathered, and I remember one lady coming to teach us, and she was telling us, you know, as chaplains you are demigods. And for a minute, I paused. I was like, what does she mean? And then she explained to us the way the standard is set so high for chaplains that sometimes they don't have time to feel as human beings. You know, it's like you are a chaplain, you need to offer me presence. Whenever I come, you need to listen to me, which is true. But then who listens to this chaplain after that? So there's that challenge of just not knowing, with burnout, with a lot of overwhelm, with a lot of emotional anguish and psychological anguish that comes with our job. Where do we run to? It is not clearly defined. And then generally, the African context puts pastors and chaplains in a very high standard. So it becomes very hard even for a chaplain to complain and say, I am tired. Because when you tell people you are tired, they assume you don't want to pray for them, or you don't want to serve them, or you don't want to listen to them. So that becomes a very, very big challenge. Now, today, with digitization of so many things, we have many things that are done online too. The hybrid conferences, you know, the online sessions that we have, the ministry that is done online. My church the other day introduced the online pastor, you know. So in chaplaincy, sometimes we are not able to reach very many people because we have not fully gotten into the online spaces. We have not fully established ourselves. The other day I was checking on YouTube, and I realized that there are very few people who are talking about chaplaincy in learning. In fact, I didn't see anyone talking about chaplaincy in learning institutions. I saw chaplaincy in hospital and in the military a lot. So the online presence is not fully there. And sometimes when we come out here, because people have no understanding of the difference between the chaplain and the pastor, then it becomes very complicated. Also, remember, there are chaplains who are older. Chaplains who started their work, let's say, in the 50s or 60s or 70s, and they have been serving till now. And these people are used to paper and sermons. They are used to just carrying their hardcover Bible, and they come with their notes written down. And so it becomes very hard to reach a generation that is technologically advanced too, because these people want you to quote unquote feel their vibe, or try to do life with them in a way that they will understand. So it becomes very hard for an older person who is closed, for example, from learning the new tactics or going online or anything, or, you know, the people who take care of their reputation more than any other thing, you know. So it becomes very hard for a chaplain to do that. Then there's this thing where you're supposed to be neutral when you're giving, when you're guiding, or when you're counseling. So you're supposed to be neutral, but sometimes it's like you are leaning on the fence as a chaplain. Like, you know, this is wrong, and you know, if I say it this way, it's very complicated when you're working with young people in learning institutions, because for them, they are like, you need to give a neutral answer. You need to be neutral in how you're treating me and how you're treating someone else. So striking the balance between the two becomes very, very hard for the chaplain, especially if they have not been trained and equipped. And I will be talking about the opportunities that we have, because one of the things that a chaplain may do is just to go out there and try to figure out, how do I be neutral without losing myself? How do I listen to someone else without attaching myself to them? Like, how do I detach from the story that I'm listening to? And so how do we curb all these things that come with chaplaincy? Now, there are other sensitive contemporary issues today. Very many issues, like betting, for example. A while ago, about 30 years ago, betting was not there. And if it was there, it was very mild, that which you would do fundraisers, and you come up with raffles, and you share raffles, and then you get the person who wins the raffle. Maybe that looks like betting. But the betting that is there today is where young people and even older people are getting themselves into spaces where they put a lot of money somewhere and then they expect huge returns in a very short time. People do not want to go step by step. And so these contemporary issues sometimes it becomes very hard for a chaplain to advocate for to tell people to stop betting, or tell the firms that promote betting to stop, because it is one of their ways of making money. So the chaplain is put in a very awkward state because they have to say this is wrong. And I will go back to the example of LGBTQ again. There is a confusion between understanding the person who is talking to you and agreeing with them in what they are talking about. So now a chaplain has to really work so hard to know how understanding is different from agreeing, and it's a very thin line. Understanding and agreeing has a very thin line, so that puts the chaplain in a very compromising situation. And then some institutions do not support chaplaincy. I don't know where you went to school, whether you had a chaplain who was fully there and would listen to you. I told you that in episode 3 that my brother was telling me the only thing he knows about a chaplain is that when there are special occasions in school, that chaplain comes and prays. And also when there let's say when they need to clear from school, that is when a chaplain is looked for. They look for the chaplain so that they can clear them. So that is also a challenge, because when the institution does not fully support chaplaincy, then it becomes very hard for the chaplain to do their work. You know, the chaplain may ask for a day off or 2 days off, but if the chaplain and the faculty are placed in the same category, the same job group, the same thing they do together, it becomes very hard. It becomes very hard for the chaplain to manage or to maneuver through. And just another thing is basically finances. You know, when I was signing up for chaplaincy, let me share with you this. When I was signing up for chaplaincy, I knew there are very few institutions in Kenya that offer chaplaincy, but I got Kabarak University, I saw St. Paul's, and then there is a big hospital, missionary hospital called Tenwek in Bomet, but I didn't want to go there, so I came to Kabarak. Now, when it got to a point where I needed to do my internship, I started wondering, where will I go? Because I have to look for it myself. I had trained as a professional chaplain, yet I know many chaplains who work, they are pastors, they are theologians. So now I needed a space where I would purely do chaplaincy for my practicum. I didn't want to go to a church and serve in the church setup. So what I did, I looked up and I found a Christian university in Nairobi called Pan-Africa Christian University. And so I got a chance to go and do my internship there. I had a very good boss. He was a good mentor to me, taught me many things about chaplaincy. And I was happy, I was excited. But before I got Park University, I connected with another lady from my church, and she's a lady who is renowned, somebody who could actually have helped me to get a chance in chaplaincy. And I remember how she tried to convince me to go back into teaching. You have a TSC number, you have a TSC certificate. Why would you just go into chaplaincy where you will only be paid a 3,000 allowance? You know, at the end of the month, they will just be giving you an allowance of 3,000. And I insisted, I said, no, I want to do chaplaincy and I'm not going back to be a classroom teacher. And of course, we disagreed. And I went ahead, I got Park University, I interned, I finished, and I got a job at Kabarak University. But what I'm saying is the understanding of how chaplaincy is in terms of even how we give resources towards chaplains, and the respect, not the respect is there, they respect pastors and chaplains both, but the monetary value is very low. And so chaplains struggle. They suffer. They have families. Remember, they have families too. They have their lives to take care of. They have their careers to build. They have so many things. They are members of the community, and sometimes they also get invited as guests in fundraisers here and there. So if there is limited support in the learning institution, you have hired a chaplain and you're just paying them the bare minimum, just something for them to get what we call from hand to mouth every day, then it becomes very hard for a chaplain to work there. Also, in the chaplaincy departments, for example, students, whenever they are stranded, because they know we offer presence, they know we are the people who stand up for them when they need us, they will always come. if there is no kitty, no money, no food, guess what? The chaplain has to give out money themselves. There are so many times where a student has come to me and they have told me, you know, I have not eaten like the last 2 days. So you like, maybe I should sacrifice my meal today and have this student feed today. And then after 3 days, again, another one comes. The same day, another one comes, you know. So when there is limited support, there is no money, there is no budget, there is no allocation of funds in chaplaincy in our learning institutions, then that becomes a very, very big challenge to the chaplains. And also remember, chaplains need every time to be updated on what is going on. The generation that we are taking care of is a generation that learns a lot because there is an outburst of information right now. People are talking about anything and everything. So the chaplain needs to be trained. They need to go through what we call capacity building. Now imagine if the school or the learning institution is not supporting that chaplain. What happens? The chaplain will just do the normal thing. You go with the flow. You preach and go home. You support wherever you can and you go home. And that is not being a good steward, because God expects that whenever he gives us a task, whenever he gives us a role, we are able to do our jobs in the right way, in a good manner, and as good stewards of the resources that we have around us. So and again, I'll talk about the opportunity we have in that. When there is no money, how can a chaplain go through, do their chaplaincy ministry without having to really struggle and get to a point of saying, I am tired, I quit, I don't want this chaplaincy thing, I don't even understand, I can't see God, and I am not even sure I was called into it. And lastly, there is a lot of competition for students when it comes to what they are giving attention to. Today, students are learning so many things. There is psychology. There is a way they can actually fix themselves, in quotes, fix themselves. That is what they think sometimes, that they can fix themselves. And so academics are there. Students need to go to class. They need to do their assignments. They need to do research. They need to meet and mingle with their friends. Remember, they are in a learning institution. It's a place where their social life is also built. Remember the social intelligence I talked about in our first episode. So all these things are needed. And this student is also expected to attend your discipleship class. Is also expected to attend your mentorship class. Is also expected to come to your office and tell you stories. So sometimes you realize that the students you're dealing with have so many competing things. Some of them, the things that they are competing with are the things that you are against as a chaplain. For example, if you are against betting, and then they are like, I'm waiting for this class to end so that I just go and place that bet. I mean, it becomes very difficult for the chaplain. Or sometimes they have to think through, do I go for that mission outreach or do I go to that class? Priorities, they will go to class because that is the first thing that brought them to school. Now, if the school has not elevated chaplaincy to make it match with the faculty and other things, chaplaincy is seen as a side thing. It is sidelined. It's seen as a side character. You see, it's like we have academics and then we have the chaplaincy. So if you need prayers, go to the chaplains. If you need encouragement, go to the chaplain. So the chaplain has no position to do other things that helps the student to grow. So the social skills that chaplains teach, the emotional skills that they teach in dealing with adversity, for example, it becomes very hard for the chaplain to do that because competing interests. And then everyone in school wants the students. You know, you have your own group, you want to meet them, you want to do mentorship here, you want to talk about something here, but they have other disciplines that are teaching them. For example, you are teaching them about a character in the Bible, or you're just going through a certain chapter in the Bible. And then there's a law student who is arguing against that. I remember when I was in school, I did religious studies in my undergraduate, and one of the units that we did was philosophy of religion. And in philosophy of religion, we would be given a question and asked to prove the existence of God. So you get a question, God is dead, discuss. Now, imagine me as a student arguing that God is not dead when I know that I have more points. On the other side, God is dead. I have more points there, you know. So the competing interest becomes very hard because this student, again, is hanging somewhere on the fence. They don't want to disappoint the chaplain. They don't want to disappoint their career. Let me call it their career. They don't want to disappoint their career, their medicine career, their law career, their teaching profession and all that. They don't want to disappoint that. So these competing things becomes very hard. There is something that I didn't mention in the ethics. The ethics of a chaplain is a challenge to some chaplains. Because remember, chaplaincy entails all our emotions, all our, like you invest everything in the life of that learner. Now, if the chaplain has no control, they are dealing with, let's say I am a lady and I'm dealing with a man who is having issues to do with addictions, like sexual addictions and the likes. So what happens if I cannot control me and take care of my space? Then this student can actually advance and I may find myself in a very bad and awkward situation. This is especially for the young chaplains. Although I have also seen the older men who are taking advantage of young people in schools and in learning institutions. You see these things on radio, you hear them on radio, you see them on television every time, talking about how a chaplain, how this pastor, how this chaplain, how this man of God did something, you know. So that ethics is a big challenge among the chaplains today, because the chaplains now have to be very careful. Sometimes you are even just doing what you're supposed to be doing, but you just never know. Something just comes up, or you are misquoted. You know, you say something, you meant something else, but you are misquoted, and people start thinking you just didn't know what you were doing. So the ethics, the ethical thing about the chaplaincy, and ethical values go with confidentiality, of course. So sometimes if a chaplain is not fully equipped, they are not able to do that. We'll talk about some of the areas that we can grow as chaplains, so that we are able to curb many of these challenges that we face in our roles today. Remember, the young people are always looking at us. The young people need us to speak up for them. The young people need us to advocate for their well-being and to grow them, not just to be there and offer special prayers or offer prayers in special occasions, not just to be there and share during their bereavement issues and all that. They need us holistically to train them, to love on them, to show them that they are needed in the world. There's one thing that my senior pastor, Reverend Ezekiel Kayeli, told me someday. When I was being charged to be a chaplain, and he gave me a charge, and one of the things that he told me is that you are going to find people who have never been loved, who need so much love, who are hard to love. And I remember listening to my pastor and saying, now, how am I going to do this? And those are some of the things that we'll be talking about in the next episode. I want us to get down to, now we have these challenges. How do we grow from these challenges? Where is the opportunity? And how can we thrive as chaplains in this generation today? The generation that has so many things, a lot of information. So until next time, I will see you. Until next time, keep well, and let's meet in my next episode. If you have not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe to it and share with your friends, so that they all get to know how